As a guitar player, should you learn how to read and write music with standard notation, or is tablature enough? Let's shed some light on this often overlooked yet crucial question. I'll give you some considerations on each music writing method. I'll give you their pros and cons, and even my advice for those of you who want it. Very quickly, just so you don't think I'm a cork-sniffing musical snob who thinks you should be able to sight read the Concierto d'Aranjuez to be considered a proper guitar player, my beginnings with the instruments were extremely messy. I was thrown on a stage at 14 or 15 and I had no idea what I was doing. So I respect and appreciate the fact that music transcends everything, that there is no right or wrong way of doing things. The idea that there could even be an alternative notation system to the standard one is almost exclusively a modern guitar and bass thing. After all, standard notation has worked for centuries and it's been refined to perfection. So why even bother with tab? On most instruments, it wouldn't make sense to use anything other than standard notation. Can you imagine counting the keys on a keyboard? I mean, your piano tab would be a nightmare. 18, 24, 33, 29, 46, right? It wouldn't make any sense. But on the guitar, because of the way it's constructed, there's an elegance to tab, there's an immediacy to it. It does really make sense. Also, modern guitar is very idiosyncratic. First of all, the guitar is an instrument where you can find one note in many different places. On a piano, a C3 is found here and only here, but on the guitar, I could play the same pitch here, 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 and here. And this can be, as a beginner, extremely confusing and intimidating. Another thing to keep in mind is the way we first interface with the guitar. When we start playing, we tend to just grab a guitar and make sounds with it and see what happens, much more so than, say, a cello player. The guitar, maybe because of it being a fretted instrument, really lends itself to exploration. I think it also has to do with style. Improvisation and discovery are much more associated with the modern guitar, they say the ARP. So a lot of us start playing without really knowing anything about notes or tempos, etc. We just wing it. And again, I think the frets make it immensely more immediate than, for example, a violin or other instruments. Because of all these reasons, a lot of us start using tab, and then we can easily go for months or years before we actually stop and ask ourselves, what the hell am I playing? And then we realize the limitations of tab. Tab has shown us how to play things, but hasn't taught us. So what are the pros of using tab? Well, the first one certainly is that it's extremely straightforward and accessible. Everyone can learn how to read and write tab in just minutes, and that makes it a language that all guitar players can understand. Secondly, with the added rhythmic notation that a lot of modern tab uses, it shows you everything you need to know to perform and play a piece of music. A common criticism of tab is that it's incomplete, but you can actually show everything on it, including fingerings and dynamics and whatever else. The third pro is that tab will get you playing music on the very first second of your guitar journey, which can be extremely encouraging and motivating for beginners. Now for some cons. First of all, tab gives you no information beyond the physical aspect of playing. It reduces the music to a finger version of Battleship. And by detaching the music from the instrument, your practice becomes a physical endeavor, but not a musical one. Also, if you're completely oblivious to music reading, I doubt that you'll be able to read the rhythmic information on the tab. And this makes a huge difference because then the tab can't stand on its own two feet. You would always need a reference, a record or a performance that you copy by using the tab. Therefore, the tab now is not a representation of the music. Standard notation, on the other hand, was invented and refined through the centuries to accurately represent a piece of music in all its details. If you can read music, you can take a score and recreate it as a composer wrote it centuries ago without needing any oral help. This means that a musical score is music. It's not just a representation of music, the score is actually the music. A big pro of music notation is that everything you read and play has musical meaning. There's a key, and there are all these notes and chords that relate to that key. The focus is not on what finger to use where, though there might be indications of that, but on the music itself. So when you read music, you are actually inside the music, you're surrounded by it. Another pro, which I guess some might consider a con, is that when you read a score, you actually have, as we said earlier, several options of how and where to play it on your fretboard. Often that will depend on what precedes and follows the passage you're reading, and therefore you're constantly interfacing with the guitar and the music in a way that you would never have to with tab. You'll be making decisions, forming opinions, and you'll truly understand the instrument. It makes you a better musician and not just a faster guitar player. This is a big one for me, and that is that when you write music down on manuscript paper, you see it in a totally different way. How a melody evolves through time, the peaks and the valleys, how dense it is in certain places and how sparse in others. There's a contour to music that becomes apparent only when you write it down. I always do that with my melodies and my songs. I put them down on paper as I'm closing in on them because it gives me a totally different look and perspective on them. Now, for the cons of standard notation, well, they're basically that it's much more difficult to learn and that not everyone knows how to read it. So unlike tablature, when you share it with others, they might respond with a blank stare. So here's my unsolicited advice on the matter, which is that you should try to rely on tab as little as possible because it's such an immediate medium that it will actually inhibit your brain function. With my students, I try to leave them as little material as possible because they get so attached to the tab and the diagrams that they delegate their brain power to these pieces of paper, and memorizing things becomes so difficult for them because they're so used to that crutch. I would also recommend that you gain a basic understanding of music reading and writing. Nothing extreme, just be able to recognize the notes on the staff and read some basic rhythms. I would also read and write simple melodies because the benefits of doing that are just incredible, and any good teacher will be able to teach you how to do that. If you're more of a DIY person, there are several good books on how to properly write music, and here's a couple I would recommend you check out. One is Music Notation by Mark McGrain, and the other is the Norton Manual of Music Notation by George Heusenstam. I have no affiliation with the authors nor the publishers. These are just my personal recommendations. So how about you? Do you use tab, standard notation, both, neither? Please let me know in the comments below. I would love for you guys to start a discussion down there because we can always learn from other guitar players. If you've had enough talk for today and you want to go back to some shredding, definitely check out this video here. There's plenty of that there. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks as always.